Hello and welcome to Next TMT Talks. This is Next Text Audio. I'm Daniel Frankel coming to you from the Coachella Valley, and I'm with David Bloom. David's in Santa Monica. How you doing, David?
I'm good. And I just want to say I was actually much closer to where you are earlier today in the mountains, the rainy mountains of the Idlewild area above the Coachella Valley. But very happy to be back in Santa Monica where we're having unseasonably chilly weather and lots of hot news. So I guess the place to start, though, apparently you have been inveigled into yet another compellingly entertaining TV show written or created by the Paramount Global folks, but running I think it's Paramount Plus only, right? And they're not running it.
It is. Yes, I have a TV show, and when I have a TV show, I share that with the world.
You
it's the
share
benefit of
yeah.
It's the benefit of having a newsletter. You got to get something out of it. I share it with you people.
You can't just like be entertained. You've got to like talk about how entertained you are. So this was MobLand with Helen Mirren and Pierce Brosnan being a older but still menacing couple, and Tom Hardy, and this is a stretch for Tom Hardy, a fixer, a muscle-bound fixer for them. I don't think he's ever done that role before.
Yeah, the rangy Tom Hardy plays a tough guy. Yeah, he's stepping out of the comfort zone and he knocks it out of the park. You know, I gotta hand it to Paramount Plus. Their shows are kind of like, you know, you go to Costco and there's the taquitos and the frozen chicken wings and everything, and I've got my wife's voice in my head saying, no, don't do it. It's processed food. You don't need it. But you cook it and it tastes pretty good. Did you get something out of it long term? Meh. But it's poor man's Sopranos. You know,
are you going to tell Tom Hardy he's the poor man's Costco taquitos of entertainment?
I would not mix that metaphor. But I was reaching a little bit there, but it's tasty. I'm recommending it along with 1923 and the rest of the Paramount Plus original series universe. It's pretty good.
This one's not from Taylor Sheridan. Somehow they left open some 12 minutes of their entire broadcast schedule to allow something else to creep, or actually their streaming schedule to creep in that wasn't from the Taylor Sheridan verse, right?
It was created by Ronan Bennett with Guy Ritchie involved in directing some episodes. Pretty good. Right. You know, I binged through Adolescence on Netflix, which beyond being really sad was one of the best things I'd seen in a while. But, you know, I'm here and it's 150 degrees. So, you know, you binge what you can. You do what you can to stay distracted.
You have a lengthy conversation about what may be the last lifeline for some of these streaming services, Charter, and Chris Whitten's very bold decision to basically make everybody blink and put their streaming service on his cable service and make it one big happy package. And you actually found some interesting stuff with it. It's helping so far.
It's early days. But what's interesting about it is it's definitely giving Charter a lift. I mean, they lost 405,000 video subscribers in the first quarter of 2024, and they cut that to 181,000 in the just completed first quarter. So that's more than half of their cord cutting has been abated. Yeah. And then you look at the subscriber bumps from what they say in the earnings reports are Charter Entitlements, meaning giveaways to the subscribers, and these are ad-supported services, so everybody's getting paid. These are meaningful subscribers. It's big distribution. Disney got 8 million subscribers domestically in the first quarter of 2024 when it went live within Spectrum Select, Charter's pay TV service. Peacock just went, and they were up 5 million for the first quarter, according to Comcast. So, you know, everybody's getting a lift. And for consumers, it's kind of a return to the big bundle, but you're getting everything you want. I think a lot of folks, kind of a trope at this point, you ended up, if you cut the cord and you got all the streaming services, you ended up paying more than you did before. So Charter's made it real easy. It's all app-based through their Xumo platform, and it's kind of going to be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. To me, the thing is, does it solve the issues people had, which was a completely inert customer service thing from the big cable guys? And you mentioned in this week's newsletter that we've had some of the tier two guys are having to pick up their game some because they're getting competition all of a sudden from fixed wireless access and fiber. And so they can't just, throw their jock in, as we used to say in sports, and expect to win the game. And so you're seeing some of that on the one hand. On the other hand, it's like, this is a big package and it ain't cheap. The select tier is not cheap, but it's, if you really want it, most everything. I mean, what is it? A half a dozen different streaming services on top of what's left of traditional cable and your local broadcasters. Starts to feel like a pretty good array of stuff. Same time, we've got people like Fubo still around, now being borged into Disney or Hulu plus live TV,
Right.
trying to emerge with a venue like knockoff. And they were the ones that sued because of venue and then got Disney to buy them, which is still going to take a while to play through. And they're the ones that were saying, this is probably antitrust. And a judge said, all of these bundles are probably antitrust. And Disney and everybody else went, I think we better figure out plan B. So how is it going to be okay for Fubo to do this? I mean, it felt like the quote you had in there of the Fubo's guy, Chris Gensler, is that his name? Gendler?
Gendler, yes, David Gendler.
It felt like he was sending a shot across the bow saying, if you don't give us fair licensing stuff, we'll have an antitrust case against you. A little bit like it was sort of like kind of a shot across the bow. That's the way I read it. And do you think that's what he was trying to do?
I don't know why it would change things if Fubo is a wholly owned subsidiary of Disney, if a venue-like service was launched through it. I don't get the logic there.
You still have the issue of the provider of the service also dictating terms for what the prices are and all that. So
right. Stuff has changed. I mean, if you look at DirecTV, they're doing genre-based bundles. They filed affidavits in Fubo's suit, so they're involved. And it looks like they got contractual freedom to do those bundles based on that litigation. So maybe the environment's changed. I do know that Elizabeth Warren is still concerned about it. So it's not going to be a terribly smooth approval process necessarily.
Speaking of judges that are mad right now, it seems like U.S. District Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers really not happy with Apple and one particular App Store executive, whom she is now considering referring criminal contempt charges on, which is a little different. And if you are any corporation executive doing stuff your company wants you to do, but the judge says don't, you got to pay attention. This could also, I think, open up the door for some really nasty shareholder lawsuits if the contempt thing is carried through against Apple. And that could get really expensive. But Apple had some bumps, it felt like, this last week. And then it all got better because Warren Buffett said, I'm retiring. But along the way, let me just say, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, has made more money for Berkshire than I ever have. Thank you, Tim. And Tim sat there and beamed. And it's sort of like, well, the universe giveth and the universe taketh away. What's your thought? The Apple, it was a rough week until Warren chimed in.
I thought that was a really eloquent thing for Warren Buffett to say. And Tim Cook is obviously battling right now. He's got a lot of headwind, as we all know. But he gave him sort of a historical context. Steve Jobs, it couldn't have been created without Steve, who he conceded died young. But it was developed as a business with a $3 trillion market capitalization by Tim Cook. And that's true. I mean, he's been a master strategist at that. So
Apple was well under $1 trillion. I think it was $500 million when Cook took over, and a 6x increase at that scale is pretty extraordinary. So we'll see. The Trump tariffs could cost the company an extra $900 million this year. That's not nothing. They're trying to figure out how to move enough of their iPhones from their China bastions over the years to India, which is somewhat better, and then work around the tariffs and everything that Trump's doing on the changes. Obviously, it feels like every hour and a half. But that being said, it's still some prevailing winds right in their sails. You mentioned some other companies that are feeling it right now. Harmonic, a bunch of the gadgets that it will be selling to Comcast are hung up in Malaysia with a whole lot higher costs. CommScope, it's going to get whacked 10 million to 15 million, but that's not going to get paid by the people providing CommScope stuff. So it's going to start to add up. You mentioned, and I thought this was interesting, and you really mentioned it in passing, and it really caught my eye. Roku had a pretty good quarter, but got beat to crap by its shareholders again. But along the way, they mentioned that they were buying, speaking of acquisitions of virtual MVPDs, they were buying Friendly TV for not much, $35 million. And this feels like, okay, the acceleration, now we're starting to see some consolidation in these virtual MVPDs. I mean, it's really starting to hit.
Well, I mean, Friendly is not a big one. And I do think that
for 185 million, it's got nothing.
Right. If you're a small subscription service and you can get access to Roku's homepage, that amplifies what they do quite a bit. And they've got Lifetime and Hallmark and some of the older kind of basic cable entertainment properties, linear properties. It's a relative bargain. I think half of the money is performance based. It seemed like just something that became available and they picked it up for a bargain price. Well, I thought was interesting is, I think if you import electronic gear from Asia, it's a rough time. And that's part of Roku's business, but they were pretty bullish otherwise. They were asked about tariffs and an overall recession, and Anthony Wood, their CEO, said, our programmatic advertising is going to thrive during this period. It provides a really flexible, kind of cost-controlled buy for advertisers that will be appealing in times of uncertainty. So they were really bullish on that, and they kind of reiterated their guidance, and that was a big topic of discussion during the earnings report. Was they were sticking by their guns. So
another analyst who likes to throw the occasional bomb into the cake batter, Rich Greenfield over at Lightshed Partners, he noted on social that Apple TV Plus has quietly hired a former acquisitions executive from Hulu and Max, Jonathan Melber, as head of global licensing. And what's interesting to me about that is Apple has licensed some stuff. They've licensed 20 movies here for 6 months, or 10 movies over there, or whatever. But they've their problem has been it's kind of a not made here thing. If it's not something that they have been making themselves with the 5 to 6 billion or so they're spending on programming, they really don't have a lot of extra stuff. They have a lot of really good stuff, particularly in science fiction.
Right.
But they don't have deep library, and that was always the knock, right?
It's since they started, it's been limited in terms of depth, and it's one hire. I don't know that you, in Eddie Q, their head of services, he hasn't gone on record and saying, we're going to wrap up our catalog. So I think Rich Greenfield is, with good foundation, is kind of speculating and extrapolating. But I think he feels like it would be an exciting development. He mentioned Severance in the other podcasts, they talked about it. And Rich mentioned Severance as being kind of a standout show. They have that show with John Hamm, Your Friends and Neighbors. That's pretty good. It seems like they're building a pretty decent, steady flow of originals, but you got to fill that in. As Greenfield said, you watch Severance and there's nothing else there. So,
but the thing is, and Rich is certainly smart enough to know this. There's a handful of things that are there. You watch that, you're done. Shrinking is great. Ted Lasso was great. The Morning Show was fine and won some Emmys, blah, 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 mostly, I think, because of its very expensive cast. They certainly have stuff. And if you're into sci-fi, again, there's Silo and Foundation and a bunch of other really good stuff beyond Severance. But the real question is, what does Apple want to do? What is the role for TV Plus in the Apple ecosystem, right? And it is a nice thing that's part of a handful of services that you get in a bundle that helps drive their services revenues, which are now at a run rate. Actually, I didn't see what it was this quarter. I need to check. But last quarter, their annual run rate was at $105 billion from their services division. So that is that's like the second biggest organization in Hollywood. I mean, that's a pretty serious little side gig. And
we're all very curious about,
yeah,
how many subscribers Apple TV Plus has, and will Apple long term stick to it? What could they possibly get out of it, making premium videos expensive? But it fits into that broader services portfolio. As long as that's thriving, I kind of feel like it doesn't really matter if it's directly profitable or not. Right. Holistically, services seems to be.
Yeah, I mean, the notion is it has to be premium, I think. It really has to fit their sort of notion of, what Cadillac used to be, right? So whatever we're doing, it's not going to be, $30 an hour reality TV shows. It's going to be quality stuff, and because that conveys a certain thing. One of the things that I thought was interesting, I had a crazy week with a lot of stuff going on. College lecture, a couple of business dinners with YouTube.
Wait, college lecture?
I did at Cal State Northridge.
My alma mater.
At your esteemed alma mater. I talked to a bunch of new media kids who first did a presentation, their end of semester presentation on streaming. And it was interesting because they talked a lot about streaming, but they didn't talk much about ad-supported streaming. And I had to sort of say, hey, you guys kind of forgot this thing that's going to be big. And you mentioned completely separate from all our stuff, but within the newsletter, I think you mentioned it's like getting close to 3/4.
Well, I'm impressed, David. That's the number 2 ranked public university in California. And I always I'm very proud of my older son, Kellen. He got into Berkeley, but he did not get into Cal State Northridge last year. So I like to hold that over him. So if they brought you in with a cap and tassel and you shape the brilliant minds that commute to the San Fernando Valley every day for enlightenment and education, my hat's off to you.
Yeah, well, they want to get the prime stuff, like just like our newsletter, nothing but the prime stuff. But there was a lot going on last week, and one of the things I thought was really interesting, though, I was on a Zoomcast with Laura Martin, the Needham and Company research analyst, another bomb thrower that I really enjoy. She's delightful. But she had a really good point about, yes, Fox is taking forever to finally launch a subscription video service, but they have to. I mean, they've had Fox Nation, which, they get very cute over there about how many subs it has. Here's an article that says we have 2 million, and it's probably more than that now. It's like, well, just tell me what it is. Like, no, we can't really do that. We're not releasing those numbers. And then stop being, it's like, it's basically fan service for hardcore Fox business or Fox News people. Fine, great. That's what that is. That's not going to be your big shoulders. But what they need is a big general interest subscription video service. They're finally going to launch one, Lachlan Murdoch says, by the end of the year, right? But she's saying, they're not going to make a lot of money off of this. Look, it's already stacked up, the number of streaming services. What they do with streaming services now is if they have one they want to try, they get rid of another one. They churn them in and out. That's what they do, unless I guess they're on Charter.
I think it was their fourth quarter earnings call. I listened to Lachlan Murdoch talk about it, and it didn't sound terribly ambitious. He downplayed it as it's not going to be one of the big streaming wars competitors. It's just they seem to have modest goals for it, and maybe that's why there doesn't seem to be a lot of rabid speculation for it. I mean, usually trade hacks like us are splitting the little and trying to find out any bit of information we can about an upcoming service like that, but I haven't seen a lot of coverage of it. And frankly, I'd like to be interested.
But she kind of asked what's it going to look like? And I said, well, Fox has since they sold $71 billion worth of Fox off to Disney, they've concentrated on news and sport. Right. And their Fox broadcast, they have carrying news and sports. But and some reality shows, including some big ones like The Masked Singer. But name me one scripted show that they do, and you'll go blank because there's like nothing. They got nothing. So what's going to actually be on this channel. If you're not going to like create a lot of originals, and that's certainly what I got from Lachlan too. It's just going to be what you're going to carry all the next Super Bowl you're going to carry other sports, you're going to carry at least highlights from Fox News Channel. It's got to go somewhere. As cable gets smaller, it's got to have a significant live streaming component.
Yeah, I mean, Fox broadcast, you look at assets like The Simpsons, and it's kind of difficult to know what is in Disney's purview and what's in.
Right.
So, yeah, it's not a rich foundation of content. It seems like there would have to be something original.
Just to get people to notice. But, what Laura was saying is like, well, so that's what they're going to have. And so probably not going to be a big moneymaker. It's going to have a hard time. But he says that doesn't matter so much. What they really need is some way to get first-party data about who's watching their stuff. And advertisers don't want the third-party data. They want the stuff about that you control, that you didn't go buy from somebody else, because they can buy it from somebody else too. They want to know what's the first-party stuff that says that this person's watching The Simpsons, or they're watching The Masked Singer, or they're watching this NFL game, and that's where the value is for them, and not just for advertisers, but to then turn around and sell the data for training sets for large language models and AI, which was interesting because like CuriosityStream, a very small streaming service founded by the guy who founded Discovery back in the day, John Hendricks, is making, I think, more money off of selling its data than it is from its subscribers.
That is astounding.
Yeah.
I mean, how many subscribers could they have, and how much data could that?
A couple million. I mean, it's a small. Look, they do the nature stuff beautifully. It is top quality, top quality stuff. That's their thing. Is the original Discovery before Discovery discovered a lot of crappy reality shows.
Yeah, you got to find all the lines you can. I mean, it was TiVo put out their big quarterly kitchen soup video business research report last week, and we didn't cover it in our newsletter. It came out a little earlier in the week, and I kind of felt like it had been out there. But the number of streaming services, I think it peaked in 2002, kind of right after the pandemic, and then it's been steadily declining. The average number of streaming services that an American home pays for. And it's got to be really hard right now for smaller niche services to sort of become part of the allocation. We do nature documentaries. Well, that's a really specific audience. So,
yeah. And do you get big-footed by, Netflix has 20 nature docs. Is that enough for them? And you're not going to spend another $2 for CuriosityStream, that kind of stuff, right? So that is a challenge.
I've got my own challenges. Max is now sending messages that they're going to crack down on account sharing. Listen, a number of us, I got a password to username, and pretty soon might have to start paying a bill. And the content's pretty good. I've been watching The Last of Us. Have you been watching that, David?
I played the games originally, and they are spectacular and cinematic enough. It's like, man, I don't need to really watch the show. I know the show's very well done, but it's like, fungally zombified humans attacking you is probably not what I need to have to go to sleep.
Well, I mean, what I liked about it, it's season 1. I'm not like you, a gamer, but I have heard that the game is extraordinary.
It was a game of the year for a lot of publications when the first one came out. And the second one was highly, highly regarded, though maybe not quite at the remarkable levels of the first game, which was extremely cinematic in the way it was constructed, had a female voice that was designed to sound like the person, I don't want to dead name somebody, Elliot Page, before. Who was a star, and it was really well done all the way around, and a damn hard game, I gotta say, but really brilliantly done, and based on a really scary, creepy scientific reality for some species of insects who get turned into zombie insects.
Well, I had problems after a while. I was a diehard Walking Dead fan with the AMC, and you could swim in zombie goo and not become infected, but the moment that you got bitten, you were infected, and you already had it anyway. So the bite somehow, the science, I get that we're kind of in an era where we're pissing all over science, but it does matter. And the show felt a little silly to me after a while. And what I liked about The Last of Us, they set it up with this sort of 1960s special where a fungi specialist says that a warming Earth could trigger a super fungus that would take over everything and turn us all into zombies. He predicted it, and they had like explanations for why people stay zombies. The fungus secretes its own natural antibiotics, so it keeps you from decomposing. So there was a little bit of attempt to sort of ground it in not reality, but this could kind of happen. And
they kind of internal consistencies within the science of that narrative universe, which is always the challenge and opportunity of any great science fiction.
Listen, they off Pedro Pascal this year. I can say that because it happened a couple episodes ago. It's been out in the public domain for a while, and
frankly, it's been out in the public domain for 10 years because it happened in the game too. Also, so
it feels just like The Walking Dead, but 10 years later and a little bit more worn down. So I think I might jump off and listen. I'll watch the ads. If they want to cut me off, that's up to David Zasloff. I'll leave it to him. But
you might be the first one he wants to cut off. I'm just going to throw that out there. But
if he knows my name, that'll be meaningful.
Everybody knows your name. You're like Norm at Cheers. Everybody knows your name.
All right. What was this mustachioed friend?
There was Norm and God, I can't remember the other guy.
The guy from the post office.
John Schatzenberger's character, right? So
since we've reached that point, we probably should wind it down, get ready to blast this issue out, and go have some dinner.
I'm going to wrap it up with one thing just to inspire everybody. While talking to a class at your beloved alma mater, I used and slightly adapted a line from the former CEO of Take-Two Interactive, who was the closing keynote speaker at the LA Games conference on Monday of last week. And Ben Feder talked about getting a call from a kid he's now on the board of Epic Games, doing a lot of work for Tencent, which is the biggest shareholder of Epic, which does lots of stuff like Fortnite. And Ben's a really smart guy, and he said he gets this call from this kid who wants to be a game developer, studying to do it. And he says, will I have a job as a game developer in 5 years? And he said, maybe not. But if you think of yourself as the creator, you're given the tools of a Greek god. What can you do with it to engage consumers? And then I kind of gave him a kick in the butt and said, now go out there and make fire, like a Greek god. We got the tools. This AI stuff is just driving Hollywood crazy, but you got the tools. Go out and do stuff. So I'm hopeful that all our listeners are figuring out how to go do stuff wherever they are. I am really happy, Dan, for this. It's not quite inaugural edition of Next TMT Live, or almost live, not live. And thanks so much.
Talk soon, David.